everybody. I don't know if you're up front enough, if you want to move closer to the front. It's up to you. So it feels good to be here, even though it's a small crowd. Thank you very much for coming. I think we will, it's going to be a really informative evening, and I'll just take initially here to acknowledge that we're meeting here tonight on Coast Salish territory, and a moment to give thanks and respect for that fact. So my main function here is to organize the event. It's actually the first event I have organized, so thanks for coming. And to facilitate Cheryl's presentation here, who's from Douglas Channel Watch. But I'll also take a minute here to tell you a little bit about my story and why I'm here. I see a couple familiar faces here, so that's great, but if those who don't know me, my name is Megan Martin. I'm a concerned citizen, first and foremost. I'm a local activist, and I suppose I'm a budding organizer. This is the first mic that I've ever rented, and it's really exciting. That's why I'm going to use it, because I rented it. So I wrote a little speech here, and I'll try not to look at it too much, but I'm not a real practiced public speaker, so I'll do my best. I'm mainly focused in my activism on the pipeline issues, the tanker issues, and how they relate to the bigger picture of climate justice and social justice, including First Nations rights, and also just common sense environmental stewardship. I also do quite a lot of work with pro-democracy efforts, trying to encourage folks to shake out of the apathy that a lot of us have fallen into over the years, and myself included. I've just begun to get more engaged, to be specific, since just before May 2011. So I think it's important that we all start to really claim the rights and responsibilities of our citizenship and do what we can to look after our country. I think Canada really needs us right now. What else here? So why am I here? Where did it begin for me? The focus on the opposition of the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline project, or proposal, sorry. I grew up for a couple of years in Terrace and Kitimat when I was younger. I also worked on commercial fishing vessels out of Prince Rupert. I played, I hiked, I camped in the Great Bear Rainforest. It has a dear place in my heart. I did public outreach projects in university 10 years ago for the protection of the Great Bear Rainforest. Quite literally, my heart aches for its protection among the rest of beautiful BC and Canada. And apart from my background in environmental protection and the fact that I work full-time assessing and cleaning up contaminated sites, I'm actually really fortunate to be flanked on both sides, generationally speaking, by incredibly inspirational people. My father, Dave Shannon, who is a colleague of Cheryl's, a member of Douglas Channel Watch, probably about the same time my twin boys were born, just over 4 years ago, my dad began what I think is probably the most important project of his life. He dedicated his heart and his soul to the opposition to the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline. I couldn't be prouder of him, and his work is a great inspiration to me. And the clincher, though, is really my boys, my two kids. I'm just so passionate at protecting their future. I feel like what I'm doing here is just a natural extension of parenting those boys. So it feels really good to be engaged too. Really, really good to be active, to be surrounded and mingling and working with all these like-minded folks working to protect the future that we know we're entitled to and the future that we know our kids deserve. So it feels really, really good. And this is kind of new to me. It's been about a year, so I encourage you guys, those who aren't already engaged, and I see lots of faces that are already engaged, but I encourage you guys to find a group or a couple groups that you relate to, and find a spot, find something that you can do. I made this little amateur poster here to provide some easy copy down websites here. All these groups here are movers and shakers, and they're all leading the way, doing a lot of work for no pipelines, no tankers, no tar sands. There's a lot of coalitions building between them as well. And on the bottom here, I find particularly inspiring two community groups, grassroots groups. One is Broke Burnaby, let's see if I can get this right, Burnaby residents opposed to Kinder Morgan expansion. They're actually co-organizing with Wilderness Committee and Tanker Free BC, an event coming up, I'll just highlight right now, I suppose. The Burnaby No Pipelines, No Tankers town hall meeting. That's on October 10th. So there are lots of, these flyers out at the table in the front if you want to grab one. Get in touch with them if you want to help out beforehand, during the event, or just help spread the word and join the event yourself. So there's a lot at risk right now, a lot of negativity. A lot of worries with the environment, the pipelines trying to crisscross the province. But out of this negativity, it comes a really amazing opportunity, a positive opportunity. And that's for people to wake up, team up, get engaged, work together. And I see it happening, I feel it happening. There's a beautiful people-powered movement starting here in BC, growing here in BC, and all across the country, right? Yeah. Yes. And it feels good. And yeah, for example, some breaking news just in the last 24 hours. Some really good news. Two good news stories, one not so good news story. I'll add the not so good news story for context. But number one, just yesterday, the Union of BC Municipalities voted to oppose expansion of oil tanker traffic on the coast, the whole coast, north and south. This is fantastic support for this movement. Yes, clap. The other great thing that happened, I think it was just announced yesterday, is environmental groups, including Wilderness Committee and West Coast Environmental Law. They launched legal action against the federal government for the government to protect the endangered species whose habitat are along the Enbridge pipeline route and the tanker route. So that's really great too. Clap. And in contrast, and to add a little bit of context to why the solution needs to include all of us, and right now, is a report was published, I think it was yesterday, by the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which is a group of 20 developing countries that are affected by climate change. And this report stated that if climate change is not addressed now, seriously, by 2030, they project that over 100 million lives will be lost because of climate change. My boys won't even be 30. So we have to get involved right now. And we can have fun with it. I mean, it's great. Like, the people you meet, it's a good thing. It's a positive thing. So you guys are here, you're engaged, you're here. You're not somewhere else. I mean, there are a lot of other events on tonight, which is, I think, why the crowd's a bit smaller, but you're here. So you're part of the movement. You're coming out to be informed, and this is great. So tell your friends everything you learned tonight. This could actually be one of the biggest questions on the table in British Columbia, possibly ever. If this pipeline was to go ahead, and it won't, absolutely not, it will not, especially if people like you and me stand together strong enough, long enough beside First Nations, the pipeline will not happen. But if it were to happen, BC would never be the same. If it's not for the fragmented ecosystems along the pipeline route that cuts through the Great Bear Rainforest, it would be from the bitumen spills that are bound to happen on land, in fish-bearing streams, along our pristine coast. And BC would never be the same, but you know what? Canada would never be the same either. Among the multitude of national-scale economic and environmental disasters that would surely occur if this pipeline went ahead, we Canadians, we would have to live with the guilt, we would have to bear the heartbreak, knowing that our nation had a big hand in what would be a rapidly intensified global climate crisis. We can't let that happen. Cannot happen. The pipeline is not only bad for BC, it's bad for Canada, it's bad for the planet. And it's obviously a symptom of a larger problem, fossil fuel dependency and lack of political will to move away from that. But the people have enough will, right? We have lots of will. We have enough will. And we are going to have the greener future, the secure future that we deserve. Just imagine the excitement, the opportunities, the job creations from all the innovations and new energy alternatives we can seek out. I mean, it'd be so exciting, and the love and the excitement that would perpetuate from a collective decision to do the right thing for our future, for our environment, for our planet. Like, we can't mess around anymore. We can't be numb to this. It's huge. It's very, very big. But we can't be numb to this. We have to be bigger than this. We have to allow our hearts to feel the loss and the regret that would happen if we let this go. Allow ourselves to feel that, and then work really hard together to prevent it. That's just what we have to do. History is going to be made one way or another with this pipeline or Kinder Morgan. The stories are the same for either one. So let's make history that we can be proud of. We know in our hearts we've done all we can, and our grandkids and their kids can be proud of the fight we fought and the fight we won, because we can win it. Absolutely, we can win it. Now you can clap. Without further ado, let's introduce what we came here for tonight, to learn what Enbridge isn't telling you. Cheryl Brown has been working with Douglas Channel Watch. She's a key member of Douglas Channel Watch. She's also a registered intervenor with the Joint Review Panel. And her colleagues have been at this fight for years, a lot longer than us South Coasters, regarding the Enbridge proposal. So we're really fortunate to have her here in Vancouver to give us a portion of their collective efforts. So thank you very much, Cheryl.
Self-organized here. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I was coming to Vancouver for other reasons. I thought, gee, I should see if people want to just hear our story. A lot of people come to Kitimat, where the end of the pipeline is, and the tankers are supposedly going to be loaded. So we get a lot of people coming that are really interested in the project there. But I thought, I wonder if people would be interested if I took down what we're currently doing in Kitimat as Douglas Channel Watch, and to tell our story, just to see what people are thinking about. There's a lot of things that, as we said, Enbridge isn't talking about. But I'll begin by telling you a little bit about myself, and it's kind of interesting because the previous comments are very much where I was coming from. In about 93, I took on the project of becoming part of what they called the land resource management planning that was done by the NDP. And I spent 10 years with as a person on the public on this great big board that did a consensus planning of the area that I lived in. And that was kind of interesting. The most interesting thing about it was that public could come, but they found it difficult to engage. It took quite a bit of commitment. But we managed to get a higher level plan sent to the province for the Caleb Land Resource Management Plan. So that was good. So I've been involved at various levels, trying to just be involved in decision making that was available to us as public. So when this Northern Gateway project came along, we thought there was a group of us that understood that this was trouble. This was not a good idea, and it meant big trouble. I don't know if you, maybe none of you ever remember, but in 1978, there was a pipeline and a tanker proposal for Kitimat. What was going to happen is they were going to take or put on tankers from Alaska oil and bring it to Kitimat, and then they were going to ship it inlet. I guess they didn't think we had enough oil. Anyways, the Thompson Commission was established. There was a big review, and they actually shut it down. Okay? They shut it down for a variety of reasons, economically and environmentally. And that they deemed, and Thompson said that the inquiry indicated very much so that it was not a safe idea to put these oil tankers on the coast. So that was 1978. So there's really some interesting stories around that. Anyways, there was a group of people that had that memory from Kitimat, and when this pipeline project decided to happen, well, we began to get together. So we were a small group, and we just didn't know how to attack this, right? So the joint review panel came along, and of course we could get involved in there. There was other things we could have done. We could, and we did. We'd become involved in, demonstrations and putting up placards and, informing people and what have you. But we also took the status of as an intervener within the process. So, and what we did, which is quite remarkable, and Dave Shannon did a lot of this work. I did some of the work. Murry Minchin did a lot of work. Dieter Wagner. But we actually developed evidence, believe it or not, right? And we submitted it to the panel. It was kind of cool. And we actually dug up a whole bunch of other evidence pieces that needed to be assured that were on the table, so that they knew kind of what was going on. But we did a whole bunch of stuff. So I'll just show you a little bit. This is just and how the evening will go is I'll just do this brief little bit of business about what we did for the joint review panel, and then I'll show you some slides about the area. And then I'm going to actually talk about oil spills, both on the land and on the water, both inland and on the ocean. And then I'm going to talk about shipping and about what TERMPOL is, and I'll get to that understanding of what that means. Okay. So, just let me go here. Oops. All right. So, a lot of this, we did a lot of work trying to educate the public, and our big public was our council. Of all the municipalities that are at these, these big provincial and regional municipal conferences, I forget what they're called. And Kitimat's the only one of the few that have said, oh no, we're neutral. We're not making a decision until the joint review panels make their choice. So they've been absolutely mute, in this whole process. So, and they took also, they has, as a municipality, they have the ability to ask questions of the joint review panel and, what have you, because all this huge volumes of information comes out. I don't know if you've seen it. It could take all those cubes plus, to hold them all. But they didn't say boo, so we took on the job of going to the council in 10-minute intervals and trying to educate them about what was going on about Enbridge. So we had all these PowerPoints. Dave went, I went, Murray went, other people went. So every 2 weeks, the council meeting, right from February onward, we went. And guess who else was there? Enbridge. They were there because they got, Well, they started, first of all, we said, oh, this is not good. We can't have them flooding, the information area with just all their material and their semi-truths. I won't say lies, but semi-truths. And so we were trying to do that. And so we did a whole bunch of PowerPoints. But anyways, one of them, we had to develop a mission statement about who we were. So, we did this. And to be truthful, we're just about asking questions that should be asked by anyone. We're reasonable citizens asking reasonable questions. And we are at ground zero. And I don't like that word because it comes from the 9/11 thing, but we truly are. And the Aboriginals at Haisla Village will say the same thing. The pipeline ends in Kitimat, and the tankers start there. Like, it's big. The terminal is going to be there. It's huge what's going to happen. The whole Kitimat River, right from almost its very source, is going to be parallel with the pipeline. So it's huge what's happening. So we just felt we just really needed to start asking some questions. We submitted evidence. As interveners, it means we can submit evidence, we can ask questions. We're also, this is scary, but you know how the hearings are started, right? Well, we're gonna be there asking questions at Enbridge within all these lawyers. You ever been in one of those rooms? Like you walk into the room with an NEB hearing, and maybe there's 50 to 100 lawyers sitting in their suits with laptops on their lap. Right? It's just complicated questions. We have no lawyer. We're just going to go up there and say, Douglas Channel, we'd like to ask so-and-so a question and so-and-so a question. And we're going to do that. So we're just reasonable people trying to get some reasonable answers. So we've done lots of evidence pieces. We did a critique of the marine quantitative risk analysis. We've done study on shipping. We've done, double-hull tankers. Dave did a whole bunch of work on the corrosion factors of double-hull tankers and how they're not the panacea. Murray did a whole bunch of work on the Kitimat Channel, figured out that there had been some seismic activity there, had been some earthquakes there, had been a whole bunch of stuff. Enbridge said nothing like that had ever been considered there. And guess what? Now the federal government has said, oh, I think there's been some seismic issues there. In fact, there was such a seismic activity that happened a number of thousand years ago, but to such a point that there was a huge tsunami wave that came down the channel. Okay? So they're now, as a result of some of the evidence that we put forward, federal government is asking some questions. I don't know how effective that will be in the end, but anyway, we'll see where it goes. Lots of issues around the Kitimat River there's lots of these marine clays, like Richmond's built on it. Okay? So what happens is you shake it, or you put lots of water in it, the salt comes out of these marine clays and they slide. They slide at 5 degrees, like 10 degrees. So the whole Kitimat Valley is littered with them. So they're having to put this pipeline zigzag down through all these marine clays. Okay. We had huge concerns about the proposal from Enbridge and about the NEB process. The proposal itself, if you read it, or any pieces of it, at first, well, even now, has huge, huge gaps in it. So there's almost like, we kept asking questions until the gaps would begin to get filled. It almost reminded me like a school kid handing in a paper, right? So you'd hand in a paper and the teacher would say, oh, not quite good enough. You have to do this. So they would add a little bit more. They'd hand it back to the teacher. Oh, not quite good enough. Hand it back again. Here's some more. You have to do a little bit more. Kid would hand it back to the teacher. Teacher would hand it back and say, oh, you have to do a little bit more. And they hand it back again, back and forth, back and forth. And finally the teacher says, oh, I think it's good enough to pass now. That's kind of what Enbridge is doing with the NEB process. They're only doing what they need to do. Right? You just keep asking the questions, and they'll say, oh, there's a little bit discovered around it. I guess we'll have to consider this or do that. So there's that kind of a thing that's happening. And overall, we're just reasonable citizens trying to ask some reasonable questions. Guess what we were called by? Joe Oliver. You can remember? Right. Radical ideologists. We were getting foreign funded money. We don't get any money. We don't get any money. Talk. Absolutely sick, right? So yeah, so we're pretty reasonable citizens asking reasonable questions. I'll just show you some slides, and then I have to. So this is the upper Kitimat River, and if you know anything about the project, you know that it's going to come from Bruderheim, Alberta, all the way across the Rocky Mountains, across the interior of BC, across the Maurice River, which is quite a controversy area as well. There's Smithers. And then it's going to go through 2 tunnels. They cannot get through the coastal mountains in any reasonable form or shape. So they've got a new idea. They're going to build 2 new tunnels. One being the Colt, and one being the Clore, one being the whole tunnel. So this is where the tunnel is going to converge. the coastal range as it hits one of the tributaries of the upper Kitimat. So it then heads down these steep valleys. This is part of the upper Kitimat again. You see just the size. So there's been clear cuts at different times. The valley is quite narrow. Ends up eventually, and I didn't have any pictures of the actual Kitimat. It's a flat, fast-flowing, meandering kind of gravel bed river. Lots of salmon, like huge volumes of salmon come up. It's famous around the world for fishing. Ends up in this estuary, and as you can see from this picture, if it's clear, there's a lot of industry. Alcan's here. Right? There used to be a pulp and paper mill. There also used to be a methanol plant there. But those two industries have gone. So industries come and go. And as Kitimatians and people from Douglas Channel watch, we know that these guys aren't here forever, right? They just come and make a mess, and then they leave. It's kind of what they do. So there's this beautiful estuary. It's quite a valuable estuary, even though there's been quite a bit of development on one side. It's one of the largest estuaries on the coastal areas, all the way up to Alaska. And you can see this is a big power transmission line from Kamano. So here's the first picture of Douglas Channel. This is where they're going to put the terminal, right sort of in this area. And I'll just show you some pictures of what the Douglas Channel looks like. Notice it's got lots of landforms with it. There's mountains. Some of it's quite open. The waters can be really rough and choppy. They're very deep though, 600 to 1,000 feet deep. The edges are really steep. There's sort of small estuaries here and there, but they're very short. And then it just drops. There's lots of fishing, as I said, lots of recreation, lots of animals that live in the area. These are the stellar sea lions. People even swim. It's a little bit cold. But lots of boating. Right where she was swimming, this is a picture that was taken right off her boat. Came up and put a bubble net up, and then came up and ate. Here's some pictures of. You can see how steep the sides are here as he exits, to the point where you can dive like about 100 meters or less for sure. Fish. So quite remarkable. Not fish. They don't eat fish, but anyways. So beautiful areas. And then you get into more open areas in around Hartley Bay. This is one of the condensate ships coming in. So they are currently bringing condensate in. So to ship bitumen or dilbit, when you get dilbit, when it comes out of the ground, after they steam it out, because they have to literally steam it out or heat it out of the ground in the sand somehow, right? They get it, and when it then gets cold and begins to harden, it's like hockey pucks. So you can't put that down a pipeline, right? So they mix it with condensate, 30%. And right now, currently, these ships are coming in. We couldn't figure out what was going on when it first started happening. Nobody told us that condensate ships were actually coming in. And they were taking it and putting it on to trucks and actually shipping it off to Alberta. But I think they put some of it in trucks and they now put it in rail cars. But it's coming in now.
Do you know where it's coming from?
Asia.
Asia.
Do you know where it's from? Do you know what it is?
Yes.
It's naphthalene. So it's processed oil.
So is it coming from China or?
I'm not sure. It's coming from Asia. Yeah. But it's coming, but it's processed oil. This stuff here costs more than a barrel of oil. Because it's processed. Right? They pay more, so they send the oil offshore, process it, and then ship this stuff back, pay top dollar for it, and put it back in the pipe and then ship it. So it's kind of crazy making, but anyway. So lots of wildlife. When you get a little, of course, there's lots of shipping, there's fishing that occurs. Beautiful, further out, there's beautiful beaches and sand areas. It's just not the steep-sided areas of these channels. Where one of the areas they're going to take, they talked about bringing in the tankers. It's called Through Whale Channel. There's a whale lab there. The guy's been there for 10 years. I think if you Google him, it's a station lab, I think it's called. Anyways, I was talking to him, and the whales, they come from, they go to Hawaii and then they come back here. And he says they sing all the time when they're in Douglas Channel. And they wonder if one of the reasons they sing so much is so they can hear the echo of the walls. It's like a big amphitheater, right? So the beautiful singing of the whales that happens in this area. So this is a little further out. It's a bit more shallow. It's a little more dangerous in terms of shipping because there's more rocks, etc. And the weather gets, can be quite brutal all the way through here. So this is out near Rupert, again, Wales. This is Green Island, where the lighthouse is. There's hope. So in the beginning of January this year, the Joint Review Panel met formally. In that, prior to this, they were asking for information, they were asking for evidence, they were asking for submission from Enbridge about the materials, etc. So in actual January, the hearings began, and they began with more of the oral evidence. So this was part of the oral evidence that was taken. The other thing that happened, this began to happen as well during this time, is the oral statements began to happen. Do you remember, if you had an opportunity, you as public could sign up and you could say, I want to speak to the Joint Review Panel about my thinking about this project. So 4,000 people signed up. It was amazing. There's been a bit of confusion about timing and places. There's been changes, so some people didn't get to speak, but a lot of people have spoken. And what I saw and what I've read, everybody, they're so passionate, and none of them are the same. Nobody's like Joe Oliver would say, well, it's all the same, right? You hear one person or hear 10, they'll spiritually say the same thing, but they didn't. All 4,000 of them, I didn't hear all 4,000, but the ones I did hear were all different. It was absolutely miraculous, incredible, and really moving, very moving. So they were able to speak within their oral statements. You know what else just happened too? The written comments. Remember those parts? You could write written comments as well. So the last day was August the 30th. They got 4,000 letters on August the 30th. I think that's amazing. They had to stay there till midnight, just processing these. And of course, people had been sending them all along, right? That just was, so it's amazing, the response. So people are wanting to be engaged, just really wanting to be engaged. And just going back to my story about the LRMP when I was part of that, it was so difficult to get people engaged. They didn't have the time, it was too much work, it was just too overwhelming, they didn't understand it, whatever. But these people want to be engaged. And then, as part of, just a little further on, so when we did these were oral evidence from the HISA. And there's Dave Shannon there, who's working with the panel, setting up the video piece. And there's part of the panel, there's Sheila Leggett and Matthew, and then there's Kenneth Bateman, I think it is, yeah. So there's only 3 of them. They have to understand and do all this work. I don't know how they do it. Like Mackenzie Pipeline had 5 people. They only have 3. I just don't know how they do it. So we, as Douglas Channel Watch, were able to do we did oral evidence. So we applied and got permission. Like a lot of people applied and didn't get permissions. I don't know how we got permission, but we did. So there was Dieter Wagner on the right, and Dave Shannon. There was another person missing, Murry Minchin, Margaret Oahan, and myself. And we gave oral evidence. And I actually got to call the government a bully in this oral evidence because here we put, all that. It was so much, my understanding was such that it's so difficult to get people engaged. And then to call good-meaning citizens, reasonable citizens, ideological radicals. Like, it was just absolutely bizarre. And that was just like a week before we began. We were just so angry. So anyways, so they get sworn in. And there is hope, I hope. Yeah, lots of hope. There's lots to say. There's the there's the channel, and the waters, the beautiful things there. There's things on the land, here's the coyote bear. He's in our area, he lives here. Like, right down at the end of Douglas Channel is where the coyote bear is the most famous for. And all the magnificent pictures come from. And he's there. So, there's been some work done in Kitimat, lots of work actually. So we've done some rallies, we said, to Enbridge. We've done it over and over again. Okay, so I'll go on to the next one and I'll show you. Oops. Show you, I'm going to talk about some things about oil spills. So there's a lot of detail one can talk about on this, but I'm just going to put together a few things that are fundamental to understanding like what we can't do. Bottom line is you can't clean this stuff up. And when you got dilbit, it gets worse. Like, you can't clean up oil. It's difficult to pick up oil. You know what it's like when you spill oil on the counter or on the floor? It's hard to do. Dilbit's even harder, especially if you've got it in. So we got some response on the ocean, and this applies to the river as well. They talk about the booms, right? And you say, oh yeah, we just put some booms out and we corral it. Well, the issue is. It's hard to do, especially when the water's flowing. Now, I guarantee you that river that we talked about that came from the upper Kitimat and went down that way, all those mountain valleys and stuff, isn't traveling any less than not. It's going fast. The channel also has a big tidal piece in it, and it operates at greater than 1 knot. You can see from this matrix that the booms don't work very well, right? Fair, poor, not good enough. Right? So, and overall, in any of the studies that have been done, or anecdotally, only about 15% of oil, if any type, can be picked up after spray, on the water particularly. Here's the most interesting one, though. So you have our history and our understanding of oil spills has been around what they call sweet crude, or syn crude, or there's different names for it. So it's oil, it's a lighter oil. So with dilbit, they put this condensate in it, like 30%, so it makes it lighter than water. Right? So when it first spills, it lands up on top of the water. Problem is now, it's exposed to the air. And that dilbit, or not, the condensate, just evaporates, right? It starts to evaporate, and it puts off this toxic fume from the benzenes and the whatever, there's a bunch of other ones. So it's a really toxic mix that comes off. You can't even get near it when it first starts, because it's dangerous to your health. So there's that factor on. So as the condensate begins to lift off of it, guess what? It gets denser, and it begins to sink. The dilbit actually sinks, well, it becomes the same and slightly denser in water, and actually sinks underneath it. And they don't know the science of it, and they will say they don't know the science of it. Enbridge admits they don't have the science about cleaning the dilbit, and they know that from the Kalamazoo and the trouble they had there trying to pick it up. They don't know what it's like in the various sea conditions. They don't know what it's like in the various temperature conditions. They don't know, they don't have the science. Nor does the federal government have the science. They will say, we don't have the science, and it says right in the evidence that's being put in by both the federal government and by Enbridge. They say, both of them say we don't have the science. So you know what they do? This is so funny, I read it, I couldn't believe it. So Enbridge was answering a question from the federal government about this, and they said, oh yeah, but remember, we met in June of 2012, remember? This meeting, government and Enbridge on us? And we agreed that we would do the science after the project was approved. So they don't know how to pick it up. They don't know how to handle it. But the other thing is, because my question to them at the time was, how are you going to give the okay for them to ship this stuff? Because they have to come with an oil response plan, and they have to have a plan on how to pick it up, right? And it has to be in place 6 months before they start the project. And they don't even have the science. So my question is, how can you even proceed to say okay about this until you know that you can even pick it up? Why would you even consider putting it on the ship until you figure you can pick it up? So it's this total disconnect that you just sort of, where is this coming from? But they don't have the science to clean this stuff up, and they don't understand how to pick it up. They don't understand how it acts. Okay, so they need a fast response, right? Because if they don't get there fast enough, it's going to sink. And it depends on how much fresh water there is, what the temperature is, you know, how much evaporates. So it can range from 6 to 60 hours. And the buoyancy, neutral buoyancy occurs, and it just sort of barely floats. So it just sits, so you don't even see it. It looks like the water is clear, like there's no oil on top of it, but it's just underneath it. So there's all sorts of things. One of the big things that was there, well, there's the salinity of the seawater. So there's a lot of fresh water that comes into Douglas Channel. Like, you think you get rain, huh? We get tons of it, plus all the snow, right? So the precipitation is really high. So this salinity piece varies considerably. The other thing is there's a lot of sediment. Like, this is a major estuary that's there. So there's a lot of sediment in the water itself. And when it is in there, it causes oil to sink even further. So the oil picks up on the sediment pieces and drops down in the column further. So here's a picture of Douglas Channel and the entrance of the Kitimat River coming down. So the pipeline would follow it down and go, and actually where the oil port would be is where the blue arrow is coming. But see that, it's hard to see maybe in this picture, but you see that plume? That's all sediment that's out there. So any kind of a spill at the terminal or in this area or anywhere along the channel for that matter is going to be, you know, compounded, and the issues are going to be compounded by this. So longer response times, and there's there's issues like it's rough, snowing, whatever have you. They can't see it. So people say, well, what about the bacteria? You know, there's all this theory, well, you leave it, you know, oil is always there, it breaks down, you know, bacteria will get it. Well, the issue is that the bacteria lives in areas where that natural oil seep occurs. So this is not an area where natural oil seep occurs. So that bacteria is not available. Plus, it works in warmer waters. Okay? And bitumen degrades much slower than other oils. So it's just a nastier product. And you know, you've probably learned a lot about the Exxon Valdez. Those sand beaches, when you dig down into them, there's still oil within them. It didn't disappear. They may say it did, but it's there as you dig down. So that's kind of the river story. Or not the river story, the ocean story. There's more story to that than just that, but those are the big pieces. They can't clean it up, and they don't know how, and they don't have the science. Right? So here's the Kitimat River. So where those pictures were that you saw coming out of the mountains, where those blue sections were, those are the tunnels. They're the floor and the whole tunnel. So it goes down that steep valley and then hits the flatter areas as it goes around the corner, and it's still downhill at a good clip, and then it hits the ocean there. So I'll just go through these quickly. Some of these slides, they're just a lot of detail, but we don't need to really look at them a lot. But what we're talking about here, and this interesting one, is each one of those points this is actually from Enbridge's data. So these are, like this, the pipe has valves on it, but if that portion of the pipe broke, this is what the volume of oil that would come out in a full bore rupture if it was detected. So the one on the far right-hand corner there is 14,000 barrels of oil. Would come out in 5 minutes. That's a 5-minute. That's how long they say they can shut it off, right? If they have all the detection and everything running properly. So that's what it is. 14,000 barrels in 5 minutes. So, now, the issue, of course, is...
Wasn't Michigan 17 hours?
Yes, it was 17 hours. Yes, yeah. So here's a bit more. They were going to put, they've got ideas of putting booms in different places and along the way, but remember the information about the booms, they don't work very well at greater than 1 knot. And this river, I guarantee you, runs greater than 1 knot. It's pretty swift. There's other issues for this pipeline as it goes through the upper Kitimat. There's where it says the Holt monolith photo. It's just a notation. We got some pictures of that, but that's where the tunnel emerges in that area. You see all the avalanches? Just avalanche track after avalanche track is coming down through here. It's going to be buried, of course, but some of it isn't. They're going to have to, where it comes out of the mountain, they have to suspend it because there's no place to bury it. So there's lots of evidence of avalanche and rockfall damage in this